Question. Hi Kim, I was wondering if you could talk about value judgments, pretty, ugly, etc. When does a value judgment become dualistic? Is saying something is pretty or handsome a separate self but not dualistic, or are they all? I assume that means are all separate selves dualistic. I grew up in an area where value judgments are everywhere. My parents were also always judging my outer appearance and everyone else's growing up. Women are constantly being evaluated based on how they look. It's very tricky in the society I grew up in. Also, I'm curious, since all of your wives have been outwardly attractive according to an earthly standard, could you date someone that wasn't outwardly beautiful but inwardly beautiful? Okay, so value judgment. Okay. A value judgment is always dualistic in the sense that there are always two extremes. Right? Pretty, ugly, good, bad, true, false. There are always two extremes. You cannot have a value judgment without having a comparison. And you cannot have a comparison unless there are two things, two concepts that are different. So yes, I mean, all value judgments are dualistic. Now there's a little bit of a trick, a subtle evaluation we have to make here. Most people would say, for example, if you are sitting at the beach watching a sunset, most people would say, oh, that's beautiful. Is that dualistic? Well, if you want to be, let's start at a more surface level. You could say, evaluating a sunset as beautiful is not necessarily dualistic in the way that most people use value judgments. Because saying that a sunset is beautiful is not putting down other people. So the value judgments, like for example the person is talking about how in the area where I grew up, value judgments are everywhere. My parents were always judging my outer appearance and everyone else's. And this is what you find in most societies. I mean, this person, it's not unique to that person at all. I had the same growing up in Denmark. So, but this is where people are comparing themselves to other people, right? And it comes from the fact that, as I've talked about in several videos, that when you go into this illusion, this state of mind that you are a separate being, you feel a sense of loss. You don't know what it is, you can't identify it. But you create the ego to deal with this sense of loss. And the ego seeks to, it can't resolve the sense of loss because the only way to get beyond the sense of loss is to reconnect to your higher self, which you can't do when you're in a state of separation. You can't be separated and connected at the same time. So the ego can't resolve the sense of loss, but it tries to cover it over or compensate for it by making you feel that you are either you are ultimately special in this world, like you see some very egotistical people or dictators or scientists or writers or whatever who seek to set themselves up as being better than others. Or you are better than some people who are really bad. So in other words, the ego can only create this value judgment, and it seeks to raise you up by putting other people down. So that's the really severe value judgment, because this really traps people. If you've grown up with it, it can be very difficult to free yourself from it. So that's why I'm saying, oh, that person is ugly, that's obviously a different kind of value judgment. Or, for example, saying that person is beautiful compared to this ugly person. That's different than saying, oh, a sunset is beautiful. But beyond this, if you really want to get to the bottom of this with value judgments, you need to watch my playlist about duality, where I talk about the duality consciousness. Because really, what it comes down to here is that I've said we have the two states of consciousness we can be in. We can see ourselves as connected beings and as separate beings. And when we see ourselves as connected beings, the spiritual path is about increasing our connection to our higher self. Right? And in the beginning stages, we will still have a lot of these value judgments. I remember first many years on the spiritual path, I still had this value judgment that, oh, it was better to be a spiritual person than to be a non-spiritual person. And of course, I was better than people who were not spiritual. And that was what my fragile male ego needed at the time, to feel that I was okay because I was spiritual. So what I'm saying is, as we go to the higher levels of the path, and especially when we go beyond the 96th level, the value judgments just begin to fade. They are not as important for us anymore. I remember quite some time ago, I realized, one day I suddenly realized, gee, I don't really have any opinions anymore, like I used to. See, I grew up in a society where, in school, for example, I was taught critical thinking is very important. So you should always be thinking and evaluating based on whatever standard you have. Right? So they would have said back then that value judgments are good when they're based on this standard of critical thinking. And so I was taught to always have opinions about everything. And for many years in my life, I had opinions. I thought whenever I heard something on the news, I should have an opinion about it. And I realized there some time ago, as I said, gee, I don't really have any opinions anymore. Whether it's this or that, does it really matter to me? In other words, it didn't stir up any emotional reaction in me, or even mental reaction where I felt I had to think about it and analyze it. So what I'm saying is that as you raise your consciousness, as you walk the spiritual path, and as you get closer to the 96th level, the value judgments just fade. And what I'm getting at with this is that you come to a point where you go into what I call a neutral state of mind. I've talked about how we have the outer personality, the 4 levels of the mind, the identity, mental, emotional, and physical. And then the core of our lower beings here is the conscious you, which is neutral. It's pure awareness. It doesn't have any of these value judgments. The value judgments are all anchored in the 4 levels of the mind, in these subconscious separate selves that are based on the consciousness of separation. So when you resolve those selves and get beyond that 96th level, it's not that you are that you become oblivious to what's happening in the world, right? You're still observing what's happening in the world, but you're just observing it without having this constant value judgment. I mean, just to take an example, politics. I remember when I was a teenager, I had a strong mental and emotional reaction to politics. Now I don't. I don't have any reaction to politics. It's not that I don't pay attention to what's happening in politics, but it's just I don't have the reaction. There's nothing that is pulling on me. And so, so it's like, you can get to a point where what I wanted to get to is this. Let's go back to the sunset. It's beautiful. But the word beautiful is just a label that is created in the separate mind based on duality. You're saying a sunset is beautiful in opposition to something that's ugly, like the landfill. Let's say you are sitting by the beach and you're looking out over the sea and you're seeing a sunset. But if you turn around, you see the landfill. So there's a comparison there. And you can come to a point where you are looking at the sunset, you're enjoying the sunset, but you are not having any label in your mind saying it's beautiful. You are just experiencing it. You're just absorbed in it. It's like you are completely aware in the moment, and you are completely immersed in just experiencing the sunset. There's nothing in your mind that's evaluating, that's comparing, that's judging, that's analyzing. It's like, in order to, as I said, in order to have value judgment, you have to have a standard of comparison. And when you go to a certain level of the path, it fades away. You don't have that standard anymore. And does that mean you don't evaluate anything? Well, you don't evaluate anything intellectually, but I can see in myself that, of course, I can observe what's happening in the world. And I can see, oh, this is going to end up a certain way. Everything has a consequence, right? So here's somebody who's doing something, and now I'm just observing, oh, this is going to have a consequence. But I'm not, my emotions are not stirred up. My mind is not evaluating, oh, he's doing something wrong. He shouldn't be doing this. I'm just observing, okay, this is happening. Obviously, this is going to be the consequence. So, so that's where you can get to. And that's the goal of the spiritual path, is to come to that point. It's also very much ties in with what the Buddha talked about 2,500 years ago. We talked about attachments, where you have, basically you can take the Four Noble Truths. Right? First Noble Truth is life is suffering. But actually, the deeper understanding there is that life is only suffering when you are in this illusion that you are a separate being. Because when you see yourself as a separate being, you're suffering because you constantly have this standard where you're judging everything. This should be happening, this shouldn't be happening. And the world is constantly threatening your sense that you are in control. And this is suffering. So, but this is based on all these value judgments. So it's really the value judgments that are causing us to suffer. And therefore the way to go beyond that is to be free of these value judgments, but that means overcoming your attachments, which is what I now say is coming, or what the Masters are saying, is coming from these separate selves in your subconscious mind. Those are it's the cells that have the attachment, it's not the conscious you. And that's why the magic of this teaching is that when the conscious you comes to see that this value judgment is just something I have taken on, it's not who I am, and it's not necessary to have the value judgment. There is no natural law that says you have to have value judgments. There is an influence from society that says so, but you're the conscious you. You're neutral. You're pure awareness. You can say, but I don't want to live my life being torn from side to side by these value judgments. And so, in a sense, there comes a point where in a sense, you could say you are looking beyond outer appearances. The outer appearances don't matter anymore. And that ties into the last part of the question about, could you date someone that wasn't outwardly beautiful but inwardly beautiful? And I would say, of course, when you get to that point, Jesus said, for example, judge not after the appearances, but judge righteous judgment. That means you're looking beyond the outer appearance and society's standard for beauty. And that's also a point you get to where this just fades away. As I said, it's like you can't just snap your fingers and be free of value judgments. It just can't be done. It is a matter of walking the path. And between the 48th and the 96th level of consciousness, you will still have a lot of value judgments. You will even have some that are based on your spiritual teaching and the way you look at the spiritual path. As I said, I had that for the first many years I was on the path. I was, in Summit Lighthouse, it was said we have the highest spiritual teaching on the planet. Most people believe that means we are the most spiritually advanced students on the planet since we could recognize the teaching. And I believe that myself. And and as I said, I had a need to feel that way. But then after some time, this just started fading away. And one day I realized, oh, I just don't have that need anymore. I don't even look at it that way. It's like when you're still trapped in these subconscious selves that are based on the value judgment, you have some belief that, oh, you must look at things this way. And then when you resolve those selves, you get to a point where you don't have that belief anymore. You don't have any pull from the collective to go into and look at society the way they do, or look at life the way people do. And that gives you an incredible freedom. I mean, it's really an incredible freedom to be free from these value judgments.